With Bitcoin prices coming down quite a bit, and I know this is something Joe's been paying close attention to, now below 8,000, what kind of demand is there for Bitcoin type ETFs? That's
an excellent question. I mean, we've had like the issuers that want to put out these products pushing for this for more than a year now, right? And I think there is still demand there because we're seeing kind of Bitcoin, even though it's kind of falling, we're still seeing kind of like people wanting to be able to invest in it. I think really it's more about access to it because Bitcoin at the moment, it's relatively unregulated. If completely unregulated, you have to have a special account to go and buy it. You maybe go on Coinbase or something like that. With an exchange-traded product, you have the sort of comfort that comes from having something on an exchange. And I think the impression for issuers that want to do these products is that if you have exchange-traded products that give you access to Bitcoin, people will come and use them.
Build it and they will come, right?
Yeah, but I'm struggling here. You said they're struggling to buy it. We can't even classify what it is, whether it's a currency, whether it's a commodity, let alone the true price, because the prices differ depending on what platform you're on. I mean, from a regulatory standpoint, how do you ensure daily liquidity, accurate pricing, and frankly, full faith and disclosure to retail investors that could be getting into this thing?
Well, this is exactly what the SEC has been asking for. So back in January, they came out with a letter that wanted to know the industry's response to just those questions. They asked about how do you value this? What's the liquidity like? What's the arbitrage like? Manipulation, custodial issues. And this is really...
cyber hacks.
Yeah, right, exactly. And this is really Cboe's attempt to kind of come back at that. Their answer to the question of what is it, incidentally, is that it's a commodity. And they think that Bitcoin ETPs should be regulated no differently than other commodity-based exchange-traded products. And that is the kind of like crux of this letter that they've written. Now, the data that they use to support this, I'd say it's a little bit weak, perhaps, or a little bit absent. They basically come out and they say that, you know, we're seeing Bitcoin futures traded this amount, though they concede that Bitcoin futures as a market in itself still isn't enough to base an ETP on. But they talk a bit about kind of Bitcoin and the growth of the amount of trading in it. But it's a little bit short on numbers that I would like to see, really, and I'm sure the SEC would like to see to be able to actually, come through with a decision on this.
The manipulation question has been out there because it's one of these weird things where it's like, okay, the futures are regulated, but the underlying thing is only regulated very loosely at best. How do they address those concerns?
So they talk about kind of like what processes they've gone through in setting up a futures exchange to actually try and kind of get comfortable with whether there's manipulation. And they say that really, if you wanted to manipulate Bitcoin, you'd have to be capable of manipulating the entire market because there are so many different platforms out there. And they don't think that that is particularly a feasible possibility. So that's kind of how they sort of get comfortable with that possibility.
How does Cboe win here if you know, they're not just sending a letter for their health, right? So they've sent this letter, they have the futures. If they were to approve a Bitcoin ETF or ETP or whatever, how does Cboe?
So they've talked about having an entire kind of crypto suite going on amongst their kind of different platforms. They'd like to be able to list these products. Obviously, Cboe owns BATS, which is the key listing venue for exchange-traded products. So I think they see this as kind of like sort of trying to put themselves out there as the place to go for crypto, whether it's kind of Bitcoin futures, other derivative-based products, or exchange-traded products.
And just a reminder here, any of the issuers that wanted to issue Bitcoin ETFs, they've all withdrawn their applications, right? There's none pending with the SEC.
Yeah, so the SEC's kind of like message from their letter in January was sort of like, quit bugging us. We'll get to you when we've kind of made a decision. So, I mean, there were more than 15 products that had kind of been filed for approval. Some of them looking for leverage, some of them looking at inverse, which is kind of, you know, pretty intense when you think about this being on Bitcoin as well, right? So generally more exotic kind of stuff. So all of those are kind of being pulled back as everybody waits to sort of see what the tone from the SEC is going to be. And it certainly feels at the moment that they're really trying to get a handle on what Bitcoin is at a very sort of basic level before they actually think about futures and exchange-traded products on those.